All right, my guest today is Gil Luria. Gil is the senior software analyst over at DA Davidson. Gil, really appreciative of your time. Talk to me about your upgrade and your renewed price target for Apple. Obviously, earlier this week, we had a lot of news in the form of AI or Apple Intelligence at Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. Gil, what did you hear out of Cupertino that makes you a bit more bullish on the company moving forward?
Well, what we heard is that Apple has a compelling product offering around AI and that offering is not going to be backward compatible. Those are the two things we heard that tell us that it's much more likely now that Apple will have a good product cycle for its next iPhone. And the reason that's important is that Apple's stock only seems to work when there's a good iPhone upgrade cycle. If you look at the last time Apple went up significantly, it was around iPhone 12. What's unique to iPhone 12 was it's the iPhone that introduced 5G connectivity. And so that it was the first time that we could use the connection that we use these days, which is often usually faster than Wi-Fi, but you needed a new phone. So everybody upgraded their phone to iPhone 12. That drives the whole rest of the business. Apple stock did well. They have not had a reason for us to upgrade our phones since then. So the last three versions of the iPhone, the 13, 14, and 15, have had very incremental improvements. And so iPhone sales have actually declined for 2 years in a row. The announcement on Monday changes all that because the types of capabilities they were able to show were very compelling. We think consumers are going to get excited about it. Once they start using them, they'll encourage their friends to buy new phones, and we'll get that iPhone cycle that we've been looking for a long time, which should drive the company to accelerate growth and the stock to go up from here.
So more on that, Gil. I mean, implicit in your argument then is the belief that the new offerings, the new AI announcements are cool enough, they're splashy enough, they will inject a fair bit of FOMO enough into existing iPhone users where people won't say, all right, you know what, I got the old 12, I got the old 13 model. Yeah, that looks cool, but I don't need an upgrade right now. You view this as being big and splashy and awesome enough to actually drive a necessary upgrade cycle enough to really be significant for the company in the next, what are we talking, next 6 months between now and year's end?
More like a year to year and a half because the capabilities won't be rolled out towards until year end. Folks will start buying new iPhone 16s. During the holidays, they'll show their friends, they'll show their family, everybody's going to get excited, they'll go out and buy them. So it's more of a 12 to 18 months where this is going to play out as people get excited about. There's nothing here that's exactly like 5G. It's not that you'll notice it the first moment you pick up a phone, but there's a lot of capabilities they showed on Monday that we will really like, that will capture our attention again for the first time in a while. We're going to be able to find messages in our texts, rewrite emails, generate new images, generate new emojis, do a lot of things that right now we can't do in our phones, but they're not going to be off device or off experience the way they are now, right? All these capabilities exist. Apple didn't invent the generative AI technology. We can use ChatGPT and we can use DALL-E and Midjourney and Perplexity and all these things, but we're using them off on the side. What Apple can do, and only Apple can do, is incorporate these things into our experience. So everybody's going to notice them and utilize them. People will all start creating images and pre-writing emails and finding messages in text where they haven't been able to do that so far. And all these different capabilities are going to be so compelling that they'll get people to want to get a new iPhone again for the first time in a while.
So I assume you're not in the camp of many. And listen, I heard them last week. I heard them coming into the event on Monday afternoon, people saying, no, this is all well and good, but Apple's late to the game. Apple's playing catch up. Look at the other competitors. Look at the other Mag 7 names who have already been capitalizing on AI. Look at these other companies like a Meta, a Microsoft, and their work already with NVIDIA. Apple's way behind playing catch up. That doesn't seem to bother you, and I would assume that's because of the dominance in the hardware space that Apple offers that a lot of those other names don't.
That's right. Apple has never had to invent new technology. Apple has always been able to see what's out there, let other people experiment with it, make sure that it works, make sure they can do it in their ecosystem, and then when they're good and ready, they roll it out to their billion and more devices. And that's when people actually start using it, by the way. Because when it's on a lot of the other platforms or off on the side, then only early adopters use it. If you think about how many people are using ChatGPT or Perplexity, we're talking about low hundreds of millions. Even a year and a half after ChatGPT was introduced, the second Apple puts something on a device, a billion people can use it. And that's very different. And again, the other difference is that's really critical is that when Apple does it and does it well, people will actually use it. It won't just be an experiment. It'll be part of how we experience the applications that we use on a daily basis, which means if we're sitting here a year from now, most of generative AI will be done on an Apple device. We're going to go from none of generative AI on an Apple device to most of generative AI being on an Apple device in the next 12 months.
A pretty wild prospect for the company. Although it's interesting, real quick before we move on from this, we've had this conversation about the Mag 7, the Magnificent 7, and then for a while it was sort of down to just the Core 5 with Apple and Tesla on the outside looking in. I mean, kind of give me your sense on how Apple fits into the broader Magnificent 7 landscape. Is it still the Magnificent 7? Do you include an AMD to be the Elite 8? Is Tesla now on the outside looking in? How does Apple play again, since Apple had been one of the two really struggling names the better part of the last 6 months or so up until now?
So we have been back and forth about what's the right grouping of mega caps. I would argue now each of the mega caps has a compelling AI story. Not just an AI story, but a compelling AI story. I'll walk you through it quickly. NVIDIA sells us all the stuff we need to do AI. Microsoft has a big lead on enterprise AI. We have Office pre-writing emails for us, right? Amazon has the biggest hyperscaler, so they're going to be hosting more AI than anybody by the time it's all said and done. Meta has made its advertising so much better because of AI. Google's catching up to that. And Tesla's self-driving, which is what the company is betting the entire business on, leverages AI capabilities. So those are the 7 that now have the AI story. And the big takeaway from that is that unlike other technology disruptions where it opened the door for small disruptors, AI is doing the exact opposite. Because you need so much capital to get AI right, really only the big companies can do it well. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now.
Real quick, is there any other company we haven't mentioned that should be now in that group? Is it AMD? Is it Lisa Su? Or another name we're not even talking enough about?
By the time AMD gets to the market may be over. And we can talk a little bit about NVIDIA and what we think about that. But you only need so many picks and shovels. And NVIDIA was so early to the game of picks and shovels, so early that they are running laps around everybody. And by the time other chip makers will catch up to NVIDIA, Apple, all these big companies that have been the buyers of GPUs and building data centers will probably have enough data centers. So I don't think anybody else belongs on that list, at least not right now.
What's the biggest risk for Apple, Gil?
Regulatory risk. The regulators on both sides of the Atlantic have decided that they don't like big technology companies for reasons that to them are self-evident. And so Apple is very visible, very big. It's in everybody's hand. And unfortunately for Apple, they've gotten caught, especially by the Department of Justice, with the hand in the cookie jar. The Department of Justice case in the United States has to do with Apple trying to crowd out Android usage. And they found some emails that made it seem like Apple was deliberate in trying to curtail the type of applications that would make Android a viable option for consumers. And that's going to be a challenge for them, because even if the Department of Justice doesn't end up suing them or taking them to court or anything like that, it means they may have to curtail some of these practices, which would bring Android back into the market in a more competitive position. In Europe, the regulation's more about privacy, about the App Store, allowing other app stores to get on board. So from both sides of the Atlantic, regulators are trying to curtail Apple's ability to manage its business the way it has been. And that's what we really have to keep an eye on.
For Apple and Apple alone, I wonder how the politics of the election 5 months out plays a part in this. We understand. I think we get a good grasp. Overseas is one thing. We get a grasp of how the Biden administration, this DOJ, is approaching these issues. I remember how well Tim Cook played the game. He played the game with Donald Trump and his family. When all these other business leaders were quick to run to the exits, citing character concerns and mean tweets, Tim Cook held his own, and we had this tariff fight with China, and Apple somehow was magically able to sidestep it. Is there a political outcome for the election in November, Gil, that you think better suits Apple's regulatory interests, at least here at home?
Well, I would say that you point out the most important thing, which is Apple's been smart enough to not get into politics, and as long as they can stay out of that, they can thrive in either outcome. What I would say more generally about technology companies, and that includes Apple, is that under this administration, they really haven't been able to make any acquisitions. Again, because of the who is in charge of the Federal Trade Commission, Amazon wasn't even able to buy $1 billion vacuum cleaner company. And so all the other big techs know that they can't buy anything right now. And that limits their ability to expand their product set. Under a different administration, different leadership at the Federal Trade Commission, that could change, and it could help Apple do something that they could have done 5, 10 years ago, like buying Tesla.
Fair enough. I got time for one more. Let's talk about NVIDIA. 40% of Q4's revenue from last year, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, and Alphabet. Does that consolidation concern you in the next 12 to 18 months as we see those companies alone start to increase their own, as they hope, more self-reliance on AI and arguably pulling back from their reliance on NVDA?
It does. It does. But let's start by saying all these companies have their CapEx budget set for this year, and they're going to buy as many GPUs as NVIDIA is willing to make. And so this year, NVIDIA will continue to ride high and generate new records every quarter. That's basically in the books, given what those companies have said about their own CapEx plans. Having said that, to your point, those companies, those very same companies, those large companies that still represent half of NVIDIA's revenue, are making their own chips because they don't want to be reliant on NVIDIA forever. And so they want to be able to be more self-reliant. They want to your point earlier, want to buy some from AMD. And by the way, they're building capacity out so quickly that at some point they're going to have enough capacity to train all the open AI models that they can handle. And they won't need to buy anymore. And that's something to remember, is that semiconductors are a very cyclical business. And once semiconductor companies' customers have enough chips, they take breaks. They can take a 1, 2, 3 year break from buying more chips. And that's what you have to remember from NVIDIA. Great year this year, probably even into next year. But at some point, those companies, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, they're going to have enough chips to do all the AI that they want. They won't need to come back for more.
Gil, I always say it's an awesome interview when I could do it for much longer, but we have to leave it there. I hope you'll rejoin us so we can continue this conversation, because these are long. These are, for the most part, sit and hold on these names if they're in your portfolio, but at some point, things will start to shift. We'll have to leave it there. Gil Luria is Senior Software Analyst at DA Davidson. My man, have a great weekend. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. You too.